know staff had just a quick moment to talk about the background on what they did to correct those minutes and the path forward. So, Kimmy, did you want to go ahead and come up and speak about that?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to provide a quick update for the committee. By the way, Kimmy High, Public Information Specialist for the City of Pensacola. After the last meeting, Casey Lagarde and I were able to meet with the people that put together City Council's meeting minutes, the City Clerk's office. I brought with me the December 1st meeting minutes, and they were able to give me some feedback as far as things that were brought up in the last meeting, such as how the election of chair was documented, if a member walks in late, how that should be documented. So you'll see that in front of you in the December 1st meeting minutes. They also were able to provide me with training for future minutes as well. The December 15th minutes that you see in front of you were actually approved, reviewed by the City Clerk's office. So as far as template is concerned, how things are written, this will be the standard moving forward. I will say, without getting into too much detail, the template that they use for City Council is different than what I am provided in order to get you guys the minutes. So it will be a little bit different, but with their help, we were able to formulate something that will get us as close as possible. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
If I could, and I apologize, I promised a member of the committee I was going to make this announcement at the beginning, and that sort of slipped through, but there was some concern voiced about individuals taking off masks to speak, and that we would simply ask, we certainly do this at council meeting, we ask everybody to still keep their mask on even when they're speaking. So, and I had not had a chance to say that, mention something to Ms. Hayes, so I apologize. As soon as I saw her take off her mask, I was like, I need to say something. I made a commitment to one of the members of the committee that we would do that, and that's certainly what we do at city council meetings, and we would try to do the same thing here. Ask of everybody's courtesy just to continue to keep masks while we talk.
Thank you, Mayor Robinson. And thank you, Kimmy. I know personally I reviewed the minutes, hope everyone else did, and I found them to be much more improved and thorough. So with that, I wanted to move to ask for a motion for the approval of the minutes from December 1st, 2020. Do I have a motion for that?
Move to approve.
Okay. Second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion? Mr. Baer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I do appreciate the fact that Kimmy did meet with staff to look at a better template. I still don't agree with the election of the chair, item number 2, the way it's done. All those motions were not made. I provided a copy of how the council did its president and vice president elections to Kimmy and to staff, so they could see this is a very disjointed way. You know, if we'd made all those motions, it'd be one thing, but we really just took votes. So I think that's inaccurate, and I think it'd be very hard for someone from the public to follow that. So I won't be supporting these minutes at this time.
Thank you. Any other discussion on that? Welcome, Mr. Durant. With that,
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Can we get a vote on that for the December 1st minutes? And we'll do, where'd Scott go?
He went to the restroom, I think.
That's okay. We have a.
He just went to turn his lights out. He's going to.
That's it. Well, I believe we have a quorum anyway with Mr. Durant. I'm okay going ahead and voting on that. Can we get a all yays? Raise your hand. Any nays?
Is there somebody online?
I think we lost it. We have.
Oh, okay. Is Kyle still?
Do we need Scott Remington for the quorum? Oh, we've got
Mr. Durant.
Okay.
And for clarification, staff, with the change in the state executive order, I believe, can virtual members vote?
There seems to be a little, they can vote, can't they? Yeah. They can vote, yes. Staff has said they can vote. All that has to be established here is a quorum. That per the governor, you are welcome. If you feel you have a reason, you just state, that you have a medical reason to stay, and we'll support that. And then you can vote, but you cannot count toward the quorum.
Thank you for that clarification. So with those minutes approved, we'll move on to the minutes for meeting December 15th, 2020. Do I have a motion for that?
Move to approve.
Do I have a second? Thank you. Any discussion, Mr. Bear?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I do see some changes here. However, if you look at item 1 under the minutes, it's 21-00074. The way it's written, the motion isn't clear as to what the motion actually is. I mean, it should say, like this item 2, a motion to approve was made, but it's like it's stuck in the old system. It's not, it doesn't match what's in the second item. Even the way we're referred to, member versus our full names, is not consistent. In some place we're referred to as member so-and-so, and this one I'm committee member Bear. It's just not consistent. And then even on item 4, at the bottom, page 2 of the minutes, which is page 11 of your packet, Mayor Robinson's name is misspelled. I don't know how that got approved. So I won't be supporting these as written either.
And I understand that. It's my belief that the intent is there, and they do, to the best of their ability, follow perhaps not council protocol, but other boards and commissions that have been approved. So, but I understand and receive your comments, and hopefully we'll get better at that. With that, I call for a vote. All yeas, raise your hand. Any nays? Okay, thank you. Meeting minutes are approved. Next.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Grant.
now, those corrections will be made, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, I'm good.
Moving on to discussion items, we have a slight change if the board is amicable. Staff, do we need a vote to,
No, you're the chair. If you want
Okay.
to call something forward, you can.
we're going to go ahead and move item number 4 under discussion items to the top of that list for discussion items. So we'll have Mr. Gary Peterson discuss, as you all know, the developments with the chief selection process. So, Mr. Peterson, can you hear me?
I can.
Welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon, or evening for you guys almost. I'm here in California, so just appreciate you guys providing an opportunity to present to you. I'm going to share my screen at this time. I think. In pretty good shape. Okay, so we're going to be talking about the search and selection process for the next chief of police for the city of Pensacola. I am Gary Peterson. I'm a retired police chief from California. The name of our firm is Public Sector Search and Consulting. Just so you know, I retired in 2014. I worked in a mid-sized recruiting firm. Did about 15 searches a year of all varieties, and found myself doing a multitude of police chief searches, and ended up wanting to focus on that, and went out on my own and started Public Sector Search and Consulting. I've done 35 police executive searches, including 7 major U.S. cities, Dallas, Nashville. You guys see the cities over the past 3 years. And so here's our track record for just last year in 2020. Quite a number of searches: San Jose, Tiburon. We've done universities, several in Colorado. Currently finishing up Opelika, Florida. That's our connection to Florida. Done searches in Michigan, Tennessee, Washington, Texas, just finished Dallas, and consulting work in Grand Rapids on reimagining policing, and then helped Long Beach, New York finish up a selection process there. Cities of all sizes, all forms of government. And so what you're probably most interested in is a search and selection process. And so a search process usually has about 8 components. Project review, and that's meeting with the client, either in person or virtually in this COVID world. Most everything on this search until the very end will be virtual. We develop a position profile with the help of HR, and the community. And we'll talk about that a little bit more after I get through this portion. We do community engagement. We do the outreach and recruiting. We help evaluate the candidates, provide a review of the candidates for the hiring authorities so they can determine how many people they want to come on site for the selection process. And then we help run the selection process, which includes the final selection by the mayor in this case, with the and so we help on all those pieces. Okay, so developing the position profile, and if anyone has a question, just stop me along the way. I'm good on being interrupted. It's okay. So we pride ourselves in getting community input for the search and selection process. So developing the profile is crucial. So talking to members of this board, members of the city council, internal folks at the police department, and then having community forums will be helpful in developing the position profile. And once that, and the position profile really is the wants and needs of the community, the city, and the department in terms of qualities, priorities, changes you hope the next leader will bring to the department. And we've got 4 questions listed there, and those are the typical questions that we ask when I interview folks from the advisory board or the city council or even the community. Those are the questions we'll ask. We'll ask about personal qualities, changes people hope that the next leader will bring, because everyone brings a different perspective. Some people probably think things are okay, and others may think that some things need to be tweaked or changed. And then what should be the priority for the next leader of Pensacola PD? And then ultimately we give kind of a free-flow opportunity for someone to say and express themselves in a way that they hadn't had an opportunity to do so, and tell us what they want the hiring authority to consider when they select the next chief. And that's kind of how you develop a profile. And it's the responsibilities of the position, the opportunities and challenges, and that final document is folded into a color brochure that is the advertisement piece for the position. And we always talk about the ideal candidate because each community is unique and has, fits really important in a community. And so the recruitment officially opens, and when it opens, it's usually a 4 to 5 week advertising and recruiting period. And so here's just a sample of 4 recent covers of our brochures. The green lines, and that the logo is our branding. And these are searches for Nashville, Bellevue, Washington, Beacon, New York, and then the recent Dallas, Texas search. So the advertising campaign, let me talk about that just for a minute. And so we advertise and do actual physical outreach with the groups likely to help us find suitable candidates for Pensacola. So PERF is an organization that we advertise with, and we also talk to them about particular candidates. We'll advertise in the Florida State Police Chiefs Association on their website, the Hispanic American Command Association, IACP, and then the groups that support in the different particular groups for advancement in their careers, the National Association of Women Law Enforcement Executives, NOBLE, Major City Chiefs Association, and then the National Black Police Officers Association. And with the Major City Chiefs Association, we have a relationship with them where we can send our brochure to them, and they will send out a mass email for us to all their members. And these are members that have a lot of them have recently graduated from their Police Executive Leadership Institute, which is a program for rising stars and chiefs. So that's where we advertise. Then we also do original research. We develop a potential candidate list and then recruit. And so we try to match the position profile, the information that's in the brochure, with the size of the organization, the scope of the responsibilities and duties of the particular candidates. We obtain nominations from our network of police executives. We have an internet tool we use to help research candidates. And then obviously we have our own email and database list of candidates that we've talked to in the past. And then, of course, we're going to reach out to any internal candidates that there may be. And so, candidate evaluation and screening. So we look at the candidates that most closely match the desired skills, experience, and attributes identified in the profile. And then we go through and do a screening interview, and then we make recommendations to the search committee as potential semifinalists. And the semifinalists would participate in the interview process. So that screening interview, our recommendations are either recommended, qualified, minimally qualified, or not qualified. And then before we bring them to the interviews, we make sure we do a background screen on them, and then a social media screen as well, to ensure they don't have potential landmines out there that could present a problem to their candidacy and to the city. And the selection process. Panel interviews, which in this time are going to be virtual. And then we recommend to the city that they interview, in these panel interviews, they have representation from a broad spectrum of the community, and invite different groups to participate. We also encourage a candidate forum, and that's usually with the public and the department, depending on the particular jurisdiction. And that's something where we'd have, in this virtual world, we would have the candidates either virtual, or if it's during the last part of the process, on site, where they'd be socially distanced, and we would have questions in advance and video record or live stream the responses from the candidates, and then provide a mechanism for the community and or the department to provide feedback. And so all of the information garnered from the process is collected for the purposes of informing the mayor's decision. So to help the mayor navigate through all the information, all the backgrounds, to get to the right selection for your community. Okay, so timeline. So this is where we are on the timeline. So completing the position profile will take some time, because we want to do that advanced work with the advisory board, the council, and the community to get some feedback so we can help develop that brochure. And obviously we use the information from Human Resources that describes the position as a piece of that as well. And then we move on to advertising, and at this point, we would like the recruitment to open on February 1st, and then recruit for 4 to 5 weeks, which would the natural break and opportunity for us to screen and then put together a packet for the hiring authority to look at by March 11th, and then look at that applicant list and select candidates to interview. The 11th or 12th. And then the good thing about the virtual world is we don't have to make plane reservations 2 weeks in advance, and we can just go the following week and do the first round of interviews. And then obviously we talked about the finalist process. And I'm sure I'll be having a conversation with the mayor to talk about that at some point. And then once the selection is made, there's a formal announcement, and then the candidate starts to transition to Pensacola. And so at this time, I'm happy to take any questions that the board may have.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. I have a few questions, but I'll let the board go ahead. Mr. Barry, you had a first question.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Peterson, for your presentation. I just have a couple questions. First of all, you mentioned community forums and wanting to do those before February 1st. How are you going to accomplish that, given COVID?
Yeah, so those are going to have to be virtual.
Okay.
And that's the environment we're in. It's going to be a matter of setting those virtual forums up and getting the information out to the community through Pensacola's network, and then provide a few dates so people can have meaningful dialogue during those events.
Okay. As far as the searches you've done, I see a number of them up there. How many have you done in 2020, or in the past year, let's say, during 2020? How many did you all do?
Searches?
Searches, yes.
Well, I think I listed our searches. Let me go back to that for you. So those are all 2020 projects.
Okay.
And so your question was?
Okay, so you said some of those were searches and some were like doing research or something. I think
Sure. So Grand Rapids was, I did that search in 2019.
Okay.
And then they had me come back and help them with strategic planning for reimagining policing.
Okay.
And then Long Beach got to almost to the finish line with their search, and they had some difficulties, and so I helped them iron that out. But all of the other ones are searches that we've done. And
Okay.
they're all police projects.
okay. And during the time of when you were doing these searches, like during, say, the latter part of the year, say, if you're doing searches that were from July until December, are you seeing any trends in like the number of applicants based on just what's happening in our country at this point?
Yeah, of course, yeah. There are fewer applicants.
Okay.
We are seeing fewer applicants. And from a personal perspective and professional perspective, I don't see that as an issue because we're still getting quality candidates.
Okay.
And just not the voluminous numbers that we once had. Yeah, so yeah, that is a factor.
Okay. And what is the last search that you did in 2020 that you completed on this
Dallas,
list?
Texas.
Dallas, Texas? Okay. Which is a slightly bigger city than we are.
A little bit.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr.
If I
Barrett.
could just add in, the one before that was Beacon, New York, which is 15,000 people.
Okay, great, thank you.
Mr. Green, you had a question?
My first question, Mr. Bear asked on his first question is regarding the COVID and community forums, but just kind of a follow-up on that. What kind of participation within the cities for the community forums would you project based on population that you've done in the past and the participation that 2020 brought us as far as the virtual world is concerned?
Yeah, that's a good question. Historically, pre-virtual world, even in cities that were very engaged, we did not see a significant number of folks show up at community forums, except for example, Grand Rapids, where there were a couple hundred people at each forum. Now, and significant number of folks who will show up to these forums. And it can range from 10 or 15 people to 40.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Any other further questions from board members? Mr. Peterson, I just had a few questions, maybe just one. This is for us and also obviously for the public watching. Could you talk about, why this process is done? Obviously, there's a multitude of cities on your list, some of the largest in the country. Is this a standard practice, you would say, for cities going forward for a nationwide search?
I would say that it is a standard practice, mainly because, for a couple different reasons. Inclusion, transparency, both of those two things help with police legitimacy. And so, if we're asking our police departments to do that as civic organizations and cities, we need to do that too. We need to include people in our searches. We need to be transparent about what we're doing and why we're doing it. And it's going to help increase government legitimacy as well as police legitimacy. And it's going to give the selected candidate, whether they're an internal candidate or an external candidate, legitimacy in the community's eyes that they went through a process and a community process where at the end of the day, they were recognized as the best candidate that fit in that organization.
Thank you. And just as a final follow-up, how would you measure success at the end of this process? We have a new chief, whether it's internal or external. How have you done it in the past? Or how would we do it here?
Yeah, that's a good question. Measuring success. A happy client measures success, is one way to do it from a business standpoint. But for me, making sure that we run a process that's open, fair, and transparent. To me, that lends itself to success, right? The interview process will not be just a year standard interview process. It's going to be sophisticated. The questions will speak to what's going on in the world today, contemporary questions. It will involve critical thinking about issues and problem solving across a vast number of social issues that are impacting police today. Because leaders' viewpoints on particular issues will impact how they make decisions for our communities. And it's important that we know that. So your standard interview process, your standard throw an advertisement up, have people apply and give an oral interview and then hire what cities have done in the past. They hired who they wanted to hire anyway, instead of listening to the community and provide the community an opportunity to provide voice and give the community who they need and not necessarily who we think they need. It's almost like it is actually like what we've done in policing historically is we've given the community what we think they need, and they're telling us something different right now. I think we need to listen.
Thank you. Mr. Berry, you had a follow-up?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Peterson, how many years have you been doing searches again? I know you probably said it, but I missed it.
Yeah, so I retired from policing in 2014.
Okay.
And shortly thereafter, I started with a mid-sized firm doing executive searches, and then started my own firm in 2017, focused exclusively on conducting police chief searches, police executive searches.
Okay, so you've been doing it since 2017 on your own. Do you track the number or like the longevity of people that are selected through your searches just to see? I don't know if they would last any longer than any other search process, but do you track that to see how long the people that have gone through that search process?
So I can tell you that of the 35 police police executive searches that I've done, one individual retired and has been replaced. Nobody has ever been fired for misconduct. Nobody has ever left for another position. And we've never had a failed cert.
Okay.
I will correct myself a little bit, because Renee Hall in Dallas just retired, so now there's two. So two have retired, and so that's, I started doing them in 15, so we're at, between, 3 to 5 years, folks have been in place. The average tenure of a police chief in America is 3.8 years.
Okay.
And I'm pretty certain we're better than that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anything else? One more time?
Yeah, I got a couple
Yeah,
questions.
Kyle.
Where are you in the search process with respect to 1 through 8? Have you started at all?
No, I have not started at all.
Okay, can you just help me understand the difference between community input and community engagement? Because it's my understanding that you need, however you decipher those two, to begin number 2, which is your development position.
Right, yeah. And so, community input relates to anyone from the community in particular. And I consider members of the advisory board, members of the council, that's part of the community there in Pensacola. So getting initial feedback from you all is helpful in developing the position profile. And then community engagement, it's also community engagement. When I refer to community engagement, I'm talking about the community forums, which there may be some overlap. So we may do all of the community input from the outward stakeholders, and then some community forums, and depending on the timing of everything, we may develop a profile using the information that we have, and then still do community forums to get additional information that can be used when screening candidates, can be used when developing questions in the selection process as well. So that information doesn't get left behind.
So you're going to solicit the community?
Yes, with the help of the city, correct.
Do you have a prior report from any of these other cities or a mock report that we can view prior to this entire process, just so we kind of understand what's coming? In other words, like a mock final report from any one of these cities, whatever you submitted in the past to any of these other cities that you've completed, or just a mock report that we can kind of get a feel for what's coming?
Right, so for the community engagement that I'm talking about, and the input, most of that's folded into the brochure, right?
No, I'm talking about what you submitted. Let's just take Boulder, for example. Can we look at Boulders, what you finalized with Boulders? Or Beacon, or Thornton, or, can we look at any of those?
Are you talking about the brochures?
No, I'm talking about the final report to the mayor that you've already completed to any of these others.
You're talking about the community engagement report.
I'm talking about the final report that you're going to submit to the mayor to help him decide. Have you done that to these cities that are on the board?
Yeah, so that's not how we do it. I'm sorry, I'm just misunderstanding you. So what we do is, and when I said the search report refers to the candidates and all their personal data and news articles to help decide who to select for interviews. When we select, when the mayor selects the particular candidates, we're going to want the mayor to be present, at least virtually, in debriefing the interview panels to gather information directly from them instead of having it come secondhand through me. And so I may be there, but the mayor is going to be there, hearing the interview panels and getting that kind of feedback from them individually. And so that's gonna be part of that process, and then, when we get feedback from, the community forums, when the candidates speak, that information will be given directly to the mayor.
So your company does not make a recommendation at the end?
Oh, for the final candidate?
Yes.
Not necessarily,
Okay.
because our position is the people that we move forward through the process, we're comfortable and we stand behind those candidates and would, if they failed within a year, we would redo the search for free. And frankly, that only applies to external candidates.
Thank you.
And the reason that is a lot of times internal candidates are gonna be selected for interview regardless of how well they do in our process.
I have a question, Mr. Peterson, I think for some clarification. Maybe if you can describe, having been through this process a number of times myself, maybe if you can explain, I think would probably be helpful to CPAC members here in the question that's being asked. The process, right? Once the interview process starts, say if you have 20 candidates, how does it get whittled down to 10? And how does it get whittled down to 3 to 5 names that get submitted to the mayor? I think that might be helpful, Kyle, in terms of what you're asking.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Alexander. So let's hypothetically say we have 25 candidates that apply. So like I said before, I screen those candidates and then I place them in categories of recommended, qualified, and then not qualified, and so forth. And so when I make those recommendations, I'm recommending the candidates that I would stand behind. And so oftentimes hiring authorities will want someone from that second group that's qualified, but I just didn't pick them for a particular reason that I explained to the hiring authority, and that person gets moved on. And so that could result in going from 6 people to 8 people that end up participating in the selection process. And then, so after the panel interviews, some cities will ask to make a cut and cut it down to 2 or 3 people for the community forum. And then after the community forum, those names may go to the mayor, and the mayor may decide based on that information. But those are still intricate details we have to work out because I haven't had that conversation with the mayor yet.
Anything else, board members?
Yeah, I just have a quick question on that last comment. So when you say that the forums or the communities want to whittle it down and make a cut, do they make specific cuts or they just ask for a cut and a number?
I'm not
Are they-
sure what day is. So what happens is after the panel interviews, the panels are asked to provide strengths and weaknesses. And that they debrief with the hiring authority and HR and myself. And then at the end of all the debrief interviews, it's usually pretty apparent who should move forward to the next round. Sometimes everyone did well and they all move forward. Sometimes, half or less than half. I've had cases where it was pretty clear that it was one candidate that was just far better than everybody else. And so it really depends. But hypothetically speaking, moving forward after those you want to know who's going to make that decision, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's ultimately it comes down to the hiring authority. If the hiring authority is not there, then it would fall on the analysis by myself, HR, and the city administrator to provide that information to the mayor and say this is what we think.
So, Mr. Peterson, let me ask the question another way. This process is probably very new to my community here in Pensacola, where we're doing a nationwide search, right? So help us understand in the process, one, you don't make the selection, is that correct?
That is correct.
All right, so along the process, let's say that you have 20 applicants. You have a qualification. Those applications come in, someone doesn't have, say, one of the qualifications is a 4-year degree, you know it. Their candidates may not meet all the basic fundamental qualifications, which is not unusual in this kind of process, correct? So you'll lose a couple of people there. And then you have an interview group, I understand, that each one of these candidates will interview before. And I would assume, and help us here, that it will be that intergroup, that interview group who will make recommendations as to who names are forwarded as the list is whittled down based on qualification and interviews, correct?
Well, I think that they will provide feedback to myself and the city administrator and perhaps the mayor if he's there for the debriefing.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're not asking them to pick and rank them 1, 2, 3, 4.
Mm-hmm.
The whole idea of the search is to provide information to the mayor, to inform the mayor's decision. And do that in a way where you're including multiple stakeholders and getting multiple, getting varied information. Because what panel A thinks is number one, the number one person, panel B may think that they're number 5. And so if you just dissect it down to a math equation, you really lose the opportunity to really look at the position profile you developed and hone in on someone that meets that criteria and has those skills.
Okay. So as you and the mayor, as you continue to talk with the mayor and his staff around the selection process, at the end, there will be X number of names, I would assume, 3 to 5
Yeah.
names, maybe just for the purpose of this conversation, that would whittle down, and those names would go to the mayor for his selection. Would that be accurate?
I think that'd be accurate.
Okay. Thank you. And this is just very new to this community, right? So we're just all trying to understand the process here. And so I
Yeah, I
think
totally
some
get it.
great questions have been asked. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Alexander. Can I move on from here? I wanted to discuss, also I wanted to see, Mayor Robinson, did you want to offer anything? I mean, you've been mentioned a few times here.
Well, I simply say that, we think this is the right thing to do for our community, to be sure that we identify the right candidate for us. And again, I think much of what you've heard Mr. Peterson say is this focuses on finding the right person for our community and making sure that we've checked everywhere across the country. We have, I don't know if we provided you this, but certainly we have it, a picture that shows our entire management team of all directors. And we have actually hired probably a significant amount of those since we've come on board. We have used the same search process all across the way. It has produced some internal candidates, some external local candidates, and some external candidates that aren't even from the area. Overall, I feel that we've created success in all of our departments where we've hired and we've built a good team. I don't think this is anything unusual compared to what we've done. Again, we're looking to make sure that we have done the right research that we've looked at. And again, I'm confident in Mr. Peterson and his groups. I've heard nothing but great things about them, and even I think Keith ran into somebody who had moved here from Dallas who spoke glowingly of you. So You know, from that standpoint, I feel confident that we have the right person and the right firm. And I feel confident by the same processes we've done other stuff that we're gonna get the right person once we get to the end of this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This question is for the mayor. I read a letter that was from the local police union, which discussed our current deputy chief and that a search was done for that position. Can you tell us a little bit more about that search?
There was a assistant chief deputy, which is, to me, significantly different than a chief. We had a plan that we thought was on the way when we conducted that, when we started that process. That was done about 9 months ago. That process, with the expectation, was that our chief was going to be here for probably another 3 years, right out to the end of his drop, and be able to give that person probably 3 years worth of experience. Obviously, we're 9 months into that. He changed his decision. We by no means fault Tommy one way or the other, Chief Leiter, for the decision he made. We understand he makes decisions. His decision, though, has put us into a point where we were not where we expected to be, and we felt like we did not do a true search for a chief. We did a search for a deputy chief that we expected would have an amount of time to get to a certain level. And again, that's not exactly what we ended up getting. So we are coming forward with a search. I certainly, at any time we've had this discussion, we've talked with Acting Chief Chrisman about this. He has told us two things. One, he plans and he would like to be included in the search, and we've told him he's certainly open and eligible to apply. Two, he has no problem with conducting a search, and he believes he's as confident in his ability that he doing a search is not bothering him. It is, it's a little concerning to me that the union is somewhat unconcerned or has concerns about his ability to compete. But I can assure you that Deputy Chief Chrisman has no problems and has expressed nothing but his willingness to be a part of the process and to compete in the process. So from that idea, I'm not sure what the problem is. I'd like to see us move forward. We've done this at every place. Even when we did a deputy chief position, we did a process. We had two candidates. One was external, one was internal. They both were very good. The person who came from Orlando was very good. But I'm not saying he was any better than Acting Chief Chrisman, and that's what came out of the selection process. So again, we're opening a process. We've hired somebody that has a reputation across the country, small cities, medium cities like us, and big cities. And we feel like we've got the right person to help us figure it out. We feel like it's the right thing to do for our city. And I don't care whether you're the head of director of sanitation to the director of neighborhood services. We've conducted the same search. And again, I think those are things that we try to do, again, through those processes. I mean, I think that's what we've tried to conduct every time we've done something.
Just a quick follow-up.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. But was the search that was done, was it a national search for the deputy chief?
I mean, it was a search that we certainly tried to go. We tried to ask as many people as possible. I don't remember any applicants that were outside of the state of Florida. We did have applicants that were external to PPD. Okay. We had multiple PPD internals. Acting Chief Chrisman was the one that rose of all the internals, and we did have some externals in there. The last decision that came to my office was there was just simply one individual from the Orlando area and Acting Chief Chrisman, and they both were impressive. And it just came down to the decision from our standpoint is the gentleman from Orlando was very impressive, but he wasn't any more impressive than Acting Chief Chrisman, and that was why we made the decision we made.
Okay. And I am not saying that we don't need a search. I think we do, and I think from what I've seen, we've hired the right person, or you've hired the right person. And I look forward to participating, and I'm hoping we haven't talked about the one-on-one interviews, but I hope that's still part of this, because I'd love to have the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Kopacek.
Yeah, this is for the mayor as well. This question is for the mayor. Mayor Robinson, I know that we've got numerous leader positions. I say numerous. We've got leadership positions within the city that don't reside in the city, whether it's Escambia County or Santa Rosa County. Has there been any discussion as to whether this position should reside within the city limits? And if not, can we recommend that?
I mean, I think those are ideas that Gary's open to you providing to him. I mean, I think we've kind of tried to work with all of our departments and hold them to a certain level. We would love it if any of our people necessarily lived here, but we've not held anybody else necessarily to that standard. I believe Chief Leiter in Brentville originally lived in Pace. They moved into town. I haven't had this discussion necessarily with Keith. I think it's always better when we can have people that actually live in the city. But one of the things is they definitely got to live within the region to be able to do the service. So, I mean, I think we would like to have that happen. I mean, it certainly, I think, sends the confidence. We certainly expect the mayor, all of our council members, they have to live within a district. So I certainly think it's there. I can't say that we've held everybody to that same standard. In fact, I know our city administrator used to live in the city, but he lives right across the way because that's the one place he could find to be on the water and still be affordable for what he had. But I know he used to live in the city in North Hill. But it's just hard when we haven't held everybody to that same standard. And I just think it's when you have city limits that are such the way that ours are, it is very tough to make everybody be there. But I don't disagree that it is nice when they do live in the city, and that always makes it better.
I'd like to actually hear from Mr. Peterson if that has been any consideration from past proposals. And one of the reasons I think it's important is because I think eventually this committee would like to address the officers also living in the city, whether there's incentives for them to move into the city, to keep their cars or whatnot. But I think for this position, to have skin in the game, I would almost like to put a recommendation together to set forth from this board from the very beginning.
I think recommendations from you individually, and if the board decides to make other ones, y'all are certainly welcome to do that.
And then I would like to know from Mr. Peterson, has this been a consideration from any of your past clients?
Actually, some clients I would say yes. Others are constrained by law, depending on their state. They're not allowed to have those kind of requirements unless it's in a city charter. And also MOUs and contracts have prevented that. Some cities have provided incentives for the police chief to live within the city limits. I think most progressive police chiefs in America want to live within the city limits of the jurisdiction that they are policing and responsible for the safety of that particular community. But in some areas, it's really expensive to live within the city you're policing. So I think it's a balancing act, and it's something that I always encourage. But there is a fine line with what you can do, as the mayor said.
Yeah, and I don't know if there's legal ramifications to it or not, but I think that it should be a leading question posed to a candidate if they would consider living in the city limits.
Certainly.
So on that, I wanted to move on to the second component of this, and I'll ask you, Mr. Peterson, or back on staff, is I believe that there will be a component of meeting one-on-one with yourself, not
Yes.
just us, but I believe it'll be open to the public in a larger virtual manner. So can you tell us a little bit about that process for each of us to meet with you virtually, obviously?
Yeah, certainly. I was getting an echo, sorry. So I will be scheduled to meet with you guys individually for half an hour, 45 minutes, and get your perspective on what the city needs in the next chief. And I have those 4 specific questions that I presented in my presentation are the same questions that I'm going to ask you at that time. And then allow you to free flow and give me your lived experience in Pensacola and which will be helpful in putting together the profile and some of the nuance that is involved in these kind of searches.
Great, thank you. And Kyle, I think obviously, I don't know if it's the consensus of the board to make it a whole recommendation.
But that's a good time to bring it up.
Right, so I would suggest to each of us to, if you want to make that an issue, I certainly am a believer in it. Please do so with Mr. Peterson. With that, is there anything else we need from Mr. Peterson, staff? We'll follow up afterwards. Yes, Gina.
Could we get access to that PowerPoint?
Yeah, sorry, access to which?
The PowerPoint that Mr. Peterson just did?
Yes, I'm sure that can be sent to us and put on the record.
It's in the
Oh, sorry,
agenda
it's in the
that's
thing.
in front of you.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. Yes.
Can you give us an idea of when we're talking about doing these interviews, just so we have a little time to gather information?
So, Mr. Peterson, did you hear that?
So time is of the essence. So probably we'll hopefully be starting to schedule those interviews and have them start next week.
Good.
I am pretty flexible. And so definitely can accommodate schedules. And ideally would be a Teams meeting or a phone call. Just a matter of scheduling.
Gary, I do believe the intent was also for this group to have ability to make comments and recommendations to you at the next meeting, which is the second meeting in January, correct?
Yeah, if that's the case, I certainly will make myself available for that meeting, certainly.
And we can make sure that's on the agenda for the 19th, I believe. Anything else before we move on and thank Mr. Peterson? Okay, well, thank you, sir. I'm sure you don't want to stick around, but thank you for your time and being involved in this process.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate everyone's time and the opportunity to present to you. Look forward to working with all of you. All right? Take care.
Thank you, take care.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, moving on. This would be the next item, and I'm not sure, around the room, do we have any kind of updates from the department or any kind of update on requests? Mr. Wilkins.
Interim Chief Chrisman asked me if he should attend tonight or not. Given the nature of the questions, he did not want to suppress any discussion here about it, so I gave him a bye for tonight. He did tell me that the mental health initiatives with the Lakeview are progressing. It's not a done deal yet, but they are progressing as he had described with you earlier, and he'll have a further update on that your next meeting. Otherwise, there's nothing else to report unless you have some questions.
No, I just wanted to put a thanks. I did notice that the complaint/commendation process had already been implemented on the PPD website, so thank you for getting that done. Anything else for Mr. Wilkins?
Mr. Chair, I would say probably because next meeting we are having significant impact, it would probably be advisable for him. I mean, he's a candidate. I don't think it's probably the right position for him to be here next time. So we're not trying to hide him from y'all, but I do think it's probably appropriate where he is a candidate and we are discussing the chief position for him probably not to be here. So that probably would happen again next meeting as well. So I just kind of wanted to give you an update for that.
I agree.
I would agree.
If you do have questions that you would like answered or from police, you can certainly funnel those to me directly or through Lawrence Powell to me, and I can get those answers for you and report them to you at the next meeting.
Thank you. Any questions? All right. I believe we're moving on from there. Our next item was going back to the CPAC report that is due in March that the mayor has requested. Last meeting, we had discussed this briefly on what this will contain and the timeline and delivery aspects of it. I gave everyone, this is in the public record, a list of what we've already voted on regarding priorities. I know Ms. Castro is new to us, but I showed her this, and this is also in our past minutes. So this is what we have on the table currently that we voted on. These are rather broad. but I wanted to give this as a starting point, as I discussed last meeting, for us to go off of. This is just a discussion item as of now for tonight, and I wanted to see, since we've had some time to discuss, or to think about it, is there anything from the board as far as new priorities or ways forward, as such?
Has there been any furtherance of the ride-alongs?
Due to impacts of COVID,
You're gonna hold on?
we're, for now, holding
Okay.
off on that. Although that is not a formal policy, if I don't, but I don't want to push that on anyone. So if you don't feel comfortable, obviously being in a patrol car is a very close situation, even with masks, but that opportunity is out there. Is there any further discussion on this? Because again, we need to have this done by March. The next meeting, January 19th, I believe, I wanted to start getting action items on this. So it would be my prerogative to each of you to come back with items that we can further discuss and refine out one by one. Mr. Bear?
Mr. Chairman, I just have a question. So why is it we're having one-on-one meetings with Mr. Peterson if we're going to have another discussion about this same thing in 2 weeks? I don't understand that.
I knew about the one-on-one meetings. I think,
I'll be happy. I think there were two issues. One is certainly the nature, the public nature, the ability to be able to communicate with each of you and get comments on a one-on-one was probably necessary for a variety of reasons, sunshine and everything else, so that y'all would have that time. But two, I believed it was also important, sunshine related, to come here as a body and allow you to discuss things publicly and allow the public to have access to it. So I think there was some feeling between Keith and I that both of these things were important. There was a one-on-one nature, and then there was also probably a public ability for us to discuss things, because you're only getting to discuss what each one of you feel one-on-one with the consultant, but then really having the opportunity to come back here and as a group talk about it. So I think there's value to both, and that's why it was positioned the way it was.
Yeah, and we discussed that same question, discussed the pros and cons of either or, and this way there are both opportunities. You've now met him, you can conduct your one-on-one conversations, you can come back together as a group and discuss your feelings as a group. But, and actually, Mr. Peterson suggested you may feel more comfortable with the one-on-one conversation with him, and more free to speak of your personal opinions, and maybe could give a more honest opinion than you would in a group at large. But if that doesn't matter to you, then you still have that opportunity to do it in a group setting also. So kind of felt like this is the best of both.
Yeah, you know, if I could add anything, Mr. Barrett, and to everybody on the CPAC, I think in your one-on-one with Mr. Peterson, I think it's a great opportunity. You had a chance, we all had a chance to meet him here tonight, and I know his work. But I would encourage, when you have an opportunity to meet with him one-on-one, talk to him about, as you represent whatever part of the communities you represent, what is it that you would like to see in the next chief, so that he can help build this profile that he spoke to. So here's what I'd like to see in the next chief. Blah, 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 blah. Whatever that is to you. And just think about you're representing your own respective community, or you're just your thought as a citizen, right? As what you'd like to see in the next chief. So I would encourage all of you to do that, because I think it'd be a great opportunity in a short period of time you have with him to do that.
thank you, Mr. Bear.
Mr. Chairman, the reason I asked that question, I know it's kind of out of turn because we're not on that item, is because if we're going to start talking about what our action items, what our recommendations are, and we're not going to have the interim chief here, I think that is going to handicap us a little bit. I'd really like to have his participation. And if we can't have him because Mr. Peterson's going to be here, that's going to be, it's going to be difficult, I think. And I'd really like to have police participation in what we do. So that's why I asked the question. I think the one-on-ones would be great. You know, The council member that appointed me gives me an earful after every meeting about what she thinks needs to happen, what her concerns are, and so I'm gonna take that and what I know as a citizen of the district and citizen of the city and share that with Mr. Peterson on one-on-one. I wanna make sure that we have the ability to do our jobs in here and we're not handicapped by the fact that we can't have PPD in attendance.
And thank you, and I absolutely understand the belief in the necessity to have their involvement. I think it's important to have any collaborative relationship. So going forward, we'll keep that in mind. But I understand the other perspectives as well. In addition to this list that we've started with, again, this is public record and this is what we've already voted on to start and we need to expand on. I would like to, in the subsequent meetings, the next month or two, obviously, to start going through existing documents that we've requested. We have multiple public records requests that have been fulfilled regarding the general orders of the PPD, the tactics, policies, and procedures. And I would absolutely want each and one of you, if you haven't already, to go through those line by line, because I think that's a good way to start to figure out substantially how we can affect change, because there is this perspective that, are we getting something done? Are we not? Are we just talking? And I certainly don't want that to keep on going. So I think that's a way to really put teeth into this committee, even though we are in an advisory role. Is there any discussion on that? Okay, well, that'll be coming forward. Before I move on, I know we have a few committee members absent. Ms. Castro, though, I know you were absent, or obviously are a new member of this committee. Did you have any clarification points? Everything's clear to you regarding that?
Yeah, I feel pretty good.
Okay, thank you. Well, with that, I think we'll go on to our action items. So we have, being provided to you right now is the proposed mission statement for CPAC that we had asked for to be delivered this meeting. And my intention is for us to act on either this statement or an amendment to it or a new one. So I'd like to proceed with discussion on this. Mr. Remington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I've put some words on paper as well, but didn't get them emailed out.
Okay.
I brought copies for everybody.
Can we do that? Mr. Remington brought copies for everyone, okay? And again, this is just a starting point. Right off the bat, there is a minor typo at the very end. It says departments, it should be department. But this is something I pulled from looking at probably over a dozen different types of committees. Not every auditor, monitor, committee, review board has a mission statement, but I think it is important, just as the department and the city has one, that we should have one to really solidify what our purpose is. Mr. Bear.
Mr. Chairman, I've reviewed your proposed mission statement in advance. The only thing I would suggest, I think it's good. It meets a lot of what we want to do, and I would just drop the purpose of and just put the Pensacola Citizens Police Advisory Committee. We don't need to have the purpose of. It's kind of self-explanatory, and we just launch right into it. So just get rid of the purpose of and just have the City of Pensacola.
Okay, thank you. So if we want to take a brief moment to review Mr. Remington's statement, is that all right? There might be some awkward silence.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Actually, yeah, I'll just hand it over to you real quick, yeah.
This is not necessarily a mission statement per se, but more something that I put together based on our meetings and based on the organization setup of the Citizens Review Board in Tampa that Mayor Bob Buckhorn put together.
Got a football game going on?
Okay, was that all for that? Anything else you wanted to add?
I'm happy to answer any questions, but that's the genesis of it.
Okay. Do we need to read this out, staff? This was just provided to us for the record. Kimmy Lawrence, do we need to read this out, the one that was just handed to us from Mr. Remington?
Whatever your mission is to go with, it's printed and we can make it available to everybody else. I don't know that you necessarily need to read it unless that's what you want to do. Whichever one you feel like is the one you want to go with.
Mr. Bear?
Mr. Chairman, no offense, Scott, but yours gets way too far into the weeds, and I think it goes beyond the scope of some of what we're going to do. I think the mission statement needs to be very simple. I think that Drew's meets the requirements very well, and I would support your mission statement at this point, Drew.
Thank you. And this is certainly helpful, Scott. This is something I almost would venture to see, on the external website for folks looking at what our expanded purpose is. And that's something, maybe we can hold on to this for a little bit.
Sure, and like I said, it's not written as a mission
Sure.
statement, it was just more of putting my thoughts on paper on what I hope the goal of the committee would be.
Our esteemed Public Information Officer, Ms. Lagarde. Yes.
Hi, I was just going to say it might be beneficial to read it into the record just for the people watching online.
Sure.
And for the public, in case they'd like to see it.
So I'm going to read both. Before I do that, was there any other proposal by itself that wanted to come forward? Okay, so I'm going to read both of these, just for the record, because I think that's a great idea and probably required. The first one that was proposed by myself reads as, and I'm going to read it as I proposed it, as the purpose of the City of Pensacola Citizens Police Advisory Committee is to advise the mayor of the City of Pensacola with recommendations to improve the trust, transparency, accountability, and inclusivity of the Pensacola Police Department. And then I'll go ahead and read Mr. Remington's proposed. The goal of the CPAC Review Board is to focus on policy review, investigations, and community outreach. The commission is tasked with verifying the Pensacola Police Department's efforts to implement the recommendations of the Florida Police Chiefs Association use of force policy and related issues dated September 3rd, 2020, and the recommendations made by the task force on 21st century policing established in 2014. The CPAC will review disciplinary cases and other important issues identified by the police department and community. The CPAC Review Board reports its findings to the mayor and the chief of police no less than twice a year and may also make recommendations for policy changes. At board meetings held no less than frequently than monthly, the chair, the mayor, and/or the lead internal affairs detective may present cases identified for the consideration of the CPAC Review Board. So those are the two proposed statements. Dr. Alexander, yes.
Yeah. So the very first mission statement here, if I could add, I agree with Mr. Bear. It needs to be short, right to the point, right? And only other thing I would include here for your consideration, where I'm gonna have to read the whole thing. The purpose of the City of Pensacola Police Citizen Advisory Committee is to advise the mayor of the City of Pensacola with recommendations to improve the trust, transparency, accountability, and inclusivity of its citizens and the Pensacola Police Department. Because that's why we're here,
I think that's a very
and that's who you represent.
valid point. Thank you, Dr. Alexander. I would be certainly supportive of that. Any discussion?
I agree with that.
Okay. Mr. Bear?
I agree with that too.
Can you reword that? Can you restate that?
Yeah, just after inclusivity of the Pensacola citizens, of local citizens or citizens in the Pensacola Police Department.
Right.
Of citizens or local citizens?
A local, so you can say local citizens.
I would just put
Pensacola citizens.
and inclusivity of its citizens,
Of its
Pensacola
citizens.
Police Department.
There you go.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, with that, Mr. Bear, we got one more.
No, one thing I just keep getting hung up on improving the trust. I'm not exactly sure how you improve the trust. There may be some better word for that, but the word person in me just doesn't seem like it flows with the rest of it. My kids are probably, if they watch this, they'd be like, yeah, why don't you just be quiet, Dad? But I know what you're trying to say, but I'm not exactly sure if that's the way to say it.
So, I mean, another word could be to build trust and transparency, or to advance.
Enhance.
Or enhance, enhance was the first word that came to mind. Enhance the trust, transparency.
Enhance in place of improve?
Yes.
I like that too.
Yeah, I like that. That was my very first thought, actually.
I'm sure all the English teachers
Barry, you
out
like
there
that?
watching are.
I like it better. I'm not hung up on the improve, I'm hung up more on trust, what exactly that is. I know what transparency, accountability, inclusivity are, but I'm not exactly sure what trust. I mean, trust is between people. It doesn't seem to stand alone to me, but I will go with enhance. I think that's better than improve. So it doesn't have to be perfect.
What about replacing trust with professionalism?
No, I think trust is a better word.
You like trust?
Trust is a far better word because that's where we are in this country today about building those relationships, because trust between police and community is what got us here.
Right. And I thought about that pretty hard.
Relationships is another word.
Right. And obviously the PPD has their own statements, but.
I got one more then.
You got one more?
Okay, so here's what I think would fix it. All right, if we take out the purpose of, just put this City of Pensacola Citizens Police Advisory Committee is to advise the mayor of the City of Pensacola with recommendations to enhance the mutual trust, transparency, accountability, and inclusivity of, what was it, citizens?
Of its citizens.
Mutual is
Mutual is what I wanted to add, because we're talking about between citizens and the police department. So that's what I was thinking.
That'll work too.
I'm good with that. Can we call it a deal?
Can you say it again?
I'll read it off. Anything else before I read it off? Okay, so for the proposed mission statement for the Citizens Police Advisory Committee is as follows. The City of Pensacola Citizens Police Advisory Committee is to advise the mayor of the City of Pensacola with recommendations to enhance the mutual trust, transparency, accountability, and inclusivity of its citizens and the Pensacola Police Department.
I like it.
Okay, can I get a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
All right, raise your hand. Yay? Any nays? Okay, thank you. So with that, I would like to have that implemented on the website and anywhere else that's deemed applicable. Yeah. Thank you.
I think that's a great mission statement.
Thank you.
You guys did a great job.
All right, we have our next item, which is, sorry, I'm getting dragged around here, town halls. So this is an action item for us to approve tonight, and that requires us deciding on dates, venues, and quantity of town halls, whether virtually or physically. We discussed this last meeting. I did write down a few dates that I was available and had proposed. Before March 31st, I believe, we need to have the report done. So my idea was to have most, if not all, the meetings conducted in February. With that, is there any discussion beyond that?
Mr. Chair, are you looking for these town halls to be as a group?
Yes, so these would be
Okay.
collective town halls, basically like this meeting without a formal agenda.
So what are we gonna do, try to do blue wahoos?
These would be, I've had some discussions with staff to have socially distanced in accordance with current policy, town halls. So we'd have to figure out the capacity limits, whether it's 50% or whatnot. Mask would obviously be required, and these would be at city buildings. The two buildings we came up with, which would be dependent on scheduling, would be one, the Bayview Center, and two, we discussed the Fricker Center, which, does everyone know where those are geographically? Basically east side and west side.
I think we also discussed that we would have one at least that would be virtual.
Correct, and then one potentially virtual.
Mr. Chairman,
Sure.
so when you say Bayview, are we talking about the senior center?
This would be the new one.
We're talking about the new center.
It'll be open? Is this open?
It is opening, and I believe, Council President Moore and Representative Andrade already have a town hall, although,
Right.
I know we're trying to keep things as minimal as possible. They have scheduled one there, I know, at the end of January.
Okay.
So if the venues are okay, we can work out scheduling. Was there any discussion before I move on to dates and whatnot on any other potential venues? Because otherwise we'll push forward with those. Now dates, I was looking to have our first one in February The dates I proposed for our first, could be either, community center, would be either Tuesday, February 2nd, or Thursday, February 4th. Does anyone have any conflicts with those? And I'm also open to others.
Can you repeat those?
Proposed would be Tuesday, February 2nd, or Thursday, February 4th for our first meeting. And I don't know how
When are our
quickly.
meetings that month?
The second is actually a meeting day.
It would be, wouldn't it, because the next one's 19.
That is correct, and we'd have to figure out the time. Well, before I move on to that, is there a time proposed in general for these meetings that you guys would like?
Do you have times associated with those?
No, I do not, so that's something we should probably discuss before the dates.
Are the gist of these town hall forums, are there gonna be listening sessions or responsiveness?
I would approach them as a Q&A session. So for folks in the community, giving them the opportunity outside this venue, which could be intimidating sometimes, for them to come up to us and ask or request recommendations for us to push forward, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Is that okay? But they could certainly be more than that if we so wish.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Fair.
So it looks like the, let me get my reading glasses. Looks like the town hall that Andrade and Jared Moore are gonna do is at 6. They're doing what, 6 to 7:30 is their time.
Okay.
So I wasn't sure if that might work, or, that's our normal, what's not our normal meeting, ours is, we're 5:37, but
Right.
somewhere around there.
And I would like to do something that's after work hours. I think that's probably the best standard of practice. And so those dates, obviously, the 2nd would probably not work. How about Thursday, February 4th?
We're just trying to look for as many people as we can get, and we don't need it's not a meeting, so we don't need a quorum there. We're just- Okay.
No, it's not an official meeting.
Right. Okay.
It would have to be noticed.
Yeah.
It would absolutely have to be noticed. I just want to say, it's not like it's an official quorum. We would love as many of you to be there to see the input, but it's not like you have to have a certain number there to have the meeting.
So the 4th works tentatively?
Yeah.
And we don't have to vote on it. Well, I don't think we necessarily have to vote on it.
You're the chair, you can
Sure.
set that if it's agreeable.
So we'll go with that date first, and then the next date, I was thinking 2 weeks later. And that would be
The 18th?
Thursday, February 18th. And I pick Thursdays because most people, it's their light day. Any conflicts with that? And that would be, if you'd like, we can go with the 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. timeframe.
I mean, that just makes us we're giving 2 nights each of those weeks, because we have our normal meeting, then we'll be doing the.
It would be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're doing in place of or in also?
This would be also, especially if we have to get the report done. Okay, so can we sign off on Thursday, February 4th, and Thursday, February 18th for physical meetings? All right, and then for a virtual meeting, staff, is there any limitations that we should be thinking about for that? That could be pretty much done anytime.
It could be done pretty much any time. I mean, we just need to make sure that we have the capacity to set it up, which I think as long as it wasn't a council night, don't choose a council meeting night, but outside of that, I think, or the agenda review, which is Monday, I think if you kind of stay away from a Monday or a council meeting, I think we're gonna be okay.
Okay. Many proposed dates for our virtual meeting? That could be the last one.
I just think it's important we have one, because
Right.
you've got a lot of people who simply are not gonna be willing, where our numbers are, to go, to an event in public, and I totally understand that, and I want them to have the access to be able to interact.
Well, just keep on with your 2-week distance and ride it out.
Right. And, well, one question would be, can these also be virtual? I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but.
Yeah, I mean, this is why I hire IT people, because I do not know the capacity of what our IT can do. So we would have to get that from somebody who is much more technical. Or I generally say that's the reason I had children, is so they could do all my IT for me, because this has gone beyond my IT capacity.
Okay. Do we want to go ahead and schedule the virtual one tonight, or should we come back to it?
I would say come back to it so we can see if we have the capacity to make the Fricker Center and Bayview Center virtual, and if not, schedule the virtual ones.
That sounds good to me. Okay, so we won't do a require a vote on this, but tentatively we will schedule, and we'll figure out which location is which, Thursday, February 4th, and Thursday, February 18th.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Grant.
If they're gonna be virtual, it doesn't matter, does it?
No, you'll be in person, but I apologize.
Sure. No, these would definitely be in person, and there may be possibility to also make them virtual.
Gotcha.
I mean, the only thing I know is Zoom is terrible though when you have background noise. I don't know how you have a meeting going at the same time. I mean, that's the part I just don't know the capacity to do that. So I'm reluctant to guarantee something that we can do when I just don't know the capacity.
Sure, and Ms. Lagarde?
Yeah, and we can definitely talk with you, maybe Kimmy and I can talk with you offline about logistics, because there are a couple of options, you know, with Facebook Live, or we've done Teams before for different meetings, so we can talk logistics and come up with a plan to make that happen.
Fantastic, thank you. And again, I think this is gonna be really important. I hope people show up to it, and if anyone's watching, please do. We wanna maximize public engagement. So with that, we'll move on. Anything else?
Mr. Chair?
Oh, yes.
Are we going to decide which date, which location we're going to be?
I think we'll have to wait for that, because staff, probably Parks and Rec, will have to look into that. So I'll work with them to figure out which
The good news is we have a lot of availability right now. We have
That's right.
not been doing a lot of programming, so we got a lot of availability.
Great. Okay, and speaking of public engagement, I think we're on to open forum. Did we have anything from the public? Okay, and one more item, just because I want to ask and make sure we're very communicative. Is there any specific items that each of you would like for the next meeting? And as always, Mr. Barrett.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to get a copy of the agenda emailed to us before the meeting.
Okay,
Please.
we can make sure that is done going forward.
Okay, thank you.
And as always, if you have an agenda item, you can email staff. Remember, we have to respect the sunshine. Anything else? All right, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.